Today I'm going to show you guys how to ride these little bit heavier bikes with more control and more safety. First off, I want to give a shout out to Mitchell Brown, one of my followers or fans or whatever you want to call them, that sent me out this custom Freeride jersey. So pretty awesome. I'm digging it. It's vintage. Kind of hard to film these things without a cameraman, so bear with me. I'm going to try and show you all the concepts and get this lined out for you guys so you can figure it out. The first thing that I want to talk about, and this is just motorcycle riding in general, is having your hips unlocked. That means you need to pivot right here in your body.
Work with me now. It's all in the head. Yeah, it's all in the hips. It's all in the hips.
Get off of me!
Hey, just easing the tension, baby.
Back in the old days, we all rode butt tucked. We sat in those big seat pockets, and we rode with tucked butts, and everything was controlled by your arms in the front. We don't do that. And when I say old days, I mean 80s and 90s. If you go back older than that, they actually used to ride with unlocked hips. I'll give credit where credit is due. Ryan Hughes kind of reinvented this technique, we'll call it, and probably added some to it as well. But in the old days, in the 70s, they rode with this technique, and it was lost when the suspension, my theory anyway, the suspension got better in the late 80s and 90s. These new bikes have very, very flat seats in them. Almost all the new bikes have a flat seat. The Freeride has a seat that goes all the way up here. The 690 obviously has a seat that goes all the way to the front. Everything is very flat and there's no pocket. This allows us to rotate our hips a lot better, you know, have a flatter back, you know, be in more this position than in this position. You're in this position, like I said, all the load is into the arms and you're holding on. This is why you'll get arm pump. If you ride in this position, you can lock with your knees and you can ride the bike with just your legs. On the 690 specifically, you have the fuel tank in the rear. So when you're going through bumps, all that mass is over the rear of the bike. And if the bike gets bucked, you're throwing around a lot of weight and a lot of fluid. When the bike, with all its mass, starts swapping back there, you have a very high probability of getting high-sided. And if you don't know what a high side is, it's when the back end of the bike gets all crooked like this and it throws you over the front. This happens in road racing. You'll see them come around the corner and they'll start sliding, and then the bike swaps and they go flying over the front. So when the rear of the motorcycle, with all that weight, starts swapping, it gets out of control real quick. The hips, especially on a big bike like this 690, when the bike swaps, it allows your hips to do the hula. All right, so if the bike goes this way, if the rear end of the bike was facing that way, my hips would go this way. You move independently like a wobbly. If you're looking at a ratchet or something like that and you need a wobbly on your ratchet, your hips will counter the forces, and you have all your weight right here countering the forces of the bike to keep you from high-siding. So it goes sideways and your hips will be here, and it goes sideways the other way, and the other swap, your hips will be here. So it's very, very important that you keep these hips unlocked. You can't fuse up and hold into your arms, because if you do, when the bike moves sideways, you're gonna move sideways. You always want your chest facing straight forward. And so if your chest is facing straight forward, you're not sideways and your momentum is not going in a different direction. It's just like in martial arts. You use momentum to put the opponent down. You use their own momentum, their own mass to put them down a lot of the time. So what happens is, if the bike's throwing my mass that way, my mass is going this way. If my chest is straight forward and my hips just move that way, the majority of my mass is still over here. And so you're doing the hula. I know this looks kind of ridiculous, but I want to exaggerate all these concepts so that you guys can grab them. So your chest is always forward. If you're in a very aggressive attack position and you have your hips out like that, and the back of the bike starts swapping, you're more connected with the front tire. It doesn't really matter what the rear of the bike is doing back here. It can be swapping all over the place. I have some videos and I'll put in some clips of the bike swapping around. I have not ridden the 690 fast on video. You guys might think I'm going fast, but I'm actually slowing down because the drone can't keep up with me if I go fast on this. Unless I had a race drone like they have in the Red Bull videos, they can't keep up. So I actually slow everything down to maybe 60% speed, and I'm not riding this bike fast in any of my videos, except for maybe some of the first person ones. So I can't get you any real good examples, but I'm going to clip in some other ones where you can see examples of this. 690 specifically, especially in cornering or really deep stuff, you got to get into that aggressive attack position, and you have to have your hips mobile, because when this thing swaps, you got to straighten it out, and you got to keep it straight, I should say. The back end can do a lot of things, but you're still in control up in the front, connected more to the front of the motorcycle. The other thing, if you've noticed throughout this video, the balls of my feet are on the foot pegs. We always want to use the balls of our feet. Maybe not always, because we got to go like this to hit the brake, but whenever you're not braking or shifting, you should be on the balls of your feet. Ryan rides probably a little bit more on his toes. I probably ride a little bit more on my balls, because my foot is significantly longer than Ryan's. So I think it's a little bit of a preference, but the main thing is that the ball of my foot is in the center of this foot peg right here. And maybe the bumpier it gets, the more you could kind of come back on there. The difference is riding the ball of feet or flat foot, or sitting in the pocket, like on some boots have a heel on them, right? And sitting in this pocket on the foot peg. That might be okay to have that pocket there to lock in so you can, don't slip off when you're hitting your brake or something. But you want to be on the balls of your feet just like any other fighting position. You want to be on the balls of your feet so you're agile. And the other side to that is you want to be able to drop your heels and stuff. This bike only has like 9 inches of suspension travel. And so if our bumps are using up all 9 inches of that, we have several inches now in our ankles. And our ankles are better at absorbing that smaller stuff, especially if our suspension is stiffer. I'm a little bit heavier these days after the Rona, but when I was really lightweight, the bike's set up pretty stiff. It's not as plush as something like an E-XC, where it feels a little bit more like a mountain bike and it's squishy. This is a little bit kind of stiffer feel, so you're not going to absorb those little tiny bumps as well as you are in something like Enduro suspension that's really squishy. So with the stiffness in the suspension, we want to be able to control the smaller bumps with our feet. There's a lot to digest in here, but that also translates up into your knees and in your hips. If you were to listen to Ryan talk about it, he talks about the mobility of different joints. This is why he's kind of anti-knee brace, all these sorts of things, because they limit mobility in the joints. Trials riders, they wear different boots than motocross riders. These are actually trials boots. They're very flexible. Trials riders need a lot more, we'll say, dexterity to get over their obstacles. They need to be able to have more mobility and more control with the feet. In motocross, where you'd be sticking your foot in ruts or landing from great big huge jumps, the boots are generally stiffer. I would say for your average everyday dude, just get some enduro boots or some trial boots. If you're riding something like the 690 and you're not trying to motocross race it, you'll have a lot more mobility in your ankle, and you'll be able to walk a lot easier and be able to hit your controls, especially if you're a newbie. You won't have this real stiff robot foot. As you progress in your skills and you get used to a boot like the pro motocrossers do, they don't need to move their ankle quite so much because they have the skills and they adapt to the boot. But for the majority of people, you want this kind of dexterity in there. You're gonna absorb the bumps a little bit more into your hips before your knees. So right here, this is not really any knee bending. It's a little bit, but you see I'm in this fixed shape. Most of the bumps are being absorbed into the hips. So you want to start with the hips before the knees. If you ride around in a real squatty position like that, you've taken away this mobility in your knees. So you want to be in a fairly relaxed, not locked out, but neutral position, and everything will start in the hips first, and then the big hits you'll have for the knees, and your ankles will take up some of that too. Riding with the hips is huge. It's the most important thing in riding a dirt bike, period. I don't care what dirt bike it is, if it's this one or a free ride or whatever. Dirt bikes in general need to be ridden with the hips. If you have unlocked hips, you have so much more control of the motorcycle. You have so much less arm pump. You're able to relax on the controls. You'll be able to use your brakes and clutches better because you won't always be death gripping. Hips, hips, hips are super important. All right, so balls of feet, super, super important. You can get away with riding a little bit more flat foot. I don't want to tell you can really, but you should be riding on the balls of your feet. And yes, that means moving your foot to hit the brake or to shift. It's not a big deal, especially on modern four-strokes where you have so much more time between gears than you would on, say, a 125 two-stroke or something where you're constantly on and off all the controls. Don't be so damn lazy, especially when you can just put your bike in second or third gear and ride the whole track, to move your foot to hit the control. If you don't feel like you can hit the controls in time, slow down to your actual skill level and hit the controls. I'll show you in one of the other clips at the end of the video. You can actually come up and hit your brake multiple times coming into a corner if you were to misjudge coming into the corner, or you need to slow down additionally or something. Should have all that done before the corner, but come off the balls of your foot and get back on the brake. When you're cornering a big bike like this 690, the most effective way that I found is being a little bit more over the front. Like I said, the weight's all over the rear, and if you're kind of cornering off the back of the bike and it slides, your ass goes with it, especially if you're sitting on the seat. Sorry about the interruption in the camera angle change. My cameraman fell down. You don't want to be connected necessarily to the back of this motorcycle with your ass buried in the seat if you're going around a corner, because when this thing slips out, and inevitably it's going to, you're going with it. So when you're taking especially a flat slippery corner like most of the ones you see in all my videos, because we ride real hard pan slippery stuff it's got cinder on top of it, so it's just like riding a really fine gravel road or a tile floor with sand on it. It's always slipping, and when you get a big bike start to weave and bob on this thing when you're going around a corner, you're in big danger. This thing crashes, stuff breaks. These things are, I don't care what anybody says, they're roughly 380 pounds when they're fueled up. When you crash these things, bars and clamps and levers and stuff are breaking. Things break. So you don't want to go down. Bodies break too. You don't want to go down. You want to be a little bit more connected to the front of the motorcycle when you're cornering these things. And what that does is it gets you over the front a little bit more, and it allows that rear end to be a little bit more independent, even if your butt's buried in the seat, because there's more mass behind and your mass is more in front. Want to have your hips unlocked. I don't ride very much, and so I revert to bad habits sometimes. So in some of my corners, you will see me tucking a little bit. I try not to. If I could ride more than once a month, I would have better technique instantly, because at the end of the day, I always have good technique. But you want to have your hips slightly unlocked, a little bit straighter back, and you're going to want to kind of get up where the pocket used to be on the bike. All right, so we're a little bit more up here, and you have a little bit more weight over the front end. You don't have to exaggerate everything, but you'll notice if you take a few corners and you have your butt in a different position on the seat, you'll feel how it handles different. You get cornering, you're up in the front, you have a little bit better kind of position on your elbows are a little bit higher. If you start dropping your elbows in corners, it sends your weight with it. So always think about being in this nice attack position. That means not being lazy, being up here with your elbows in a nice position. Lever setup is very important for you having your hands in the right position and your elbows in the right position too. Basically, you want your lever to be somewhere along parallel with your arms in your attack position. I run mine slightly high because of my wrist, and I also find that it subconsciously makes me rest my fingers on the levers a little bit better if I have them slightly higher. I actually like to keep my fingers on the controls most of the time. Anything sudden happens, you have better access to the brake and the clutch if you need to, use the clutch in a corner or whatever. Up on the front of the bike, we're still on the balls of our feet down here. You can see that. And when you're on the balls of your feet and you're in the front of the bike here, if you look at the angle of my leg, it's driving into the traction spot on the rear wheel. This is pushing in that direction. So when you're cornering and we're turning left right now, you want the balls of your feet on the pegs and driving pressure into the outside peg. When you're driving pressure into the outside peg, you're driving traction to the rear wheel. So there's like, weight your outside peg, weight your outside peg. Well, what does that mean and what does it do? It means exactly what I just showed you. Your leg angle is pointing right at the traction spot on the tire connecting with the earth. And when you're putting weight into that foot peg, it's driving it down there. So when you're going through the corner, if you have weight driving into where the tire is connecting, you're going to have more traction. That's just the way it is. You need to be on the balls of your foot. If you're on the flat part of your foot, you're more likely to be lazy and be sitting on the seat. If you're on your toe, you're more likely to have some movement in your butt. Light on your seat when cornering if you can. This is hard. It's very easy to get lazy when you're doing this, but you almost want your quad preloaded like you're in a pistol squat. So you can do this. So you're loading into the ball of the foot, right? And we're not actually sitting on the seat. There's a gap here. We might be resting on the seat, but we're not sitting into the seat. And why this is super important, especially when the speeds start to get high, is if you get some acceleration chop and stuff out of corners, that stuff's transferring right up into you and it can make you get out of whack. If you're all loaded up into the foot and you're not this high off the seat, but all your weight is not on the seat and your weight is going into the peg, not only do you get the drive because you're loaded right here and not loaded into your bum, you have a little bit of travel to absorb those bumps when they're coming up into your butt. So that aggressive attack position has you kind of loaded into the front, it has you loaded into your foot, and as you're accelerating, you can take those bumps up. Every little bit of travel that you can get from your body is travel that your suspension doesn't have to do. It's very important to have your suspension set up correctly, but if it's not correct, or you have a bike that's not as well suspended as a modern motocross bike, you need your body to be able to do that. And it's very, very important on a big machine like this, because if it starts to move around, it's over. You can't ride it fast if you're being lazy, period. We want to be a little bit more on the front of the 690, so we're connected with the front. We want our foot buried into the foot peg. If you can turn your toes in, and that will allow you to grip the side of the bike better here. I can take one foot off and do this fancy skateboard move here. I'm loading my leg and stuff into the bike too for some security. It also holds the bike in place. The problem is the 690 doesn't have a frame here like a motocross bike. So if you see me riding the 690, you'll see my foot looks like it's turned out like this. Well, I'm smashing my boot into this cover and into the swing arm right there because there is no spar. I have steg pegs on this bike. I find these very useful on this machine, and that allows me to get my boot kind of hooked into the part of the frame here and down here. So there's a lot of pressure right here and there's a lot of pressure right here, and obviously there's none right behind it because there's nothing there. On the motocross bikes or bikes with frames, even the Freeride, you can lock in lower on your foot. On the 690 you got to lock in a little bit higher and a little bit lower. It does the same. So I'm locked in here. I can do squats on this thing because I'm locked in. You're going around the corner, you're in your aggressive position. It'll almost feel like your head is sitting over the headlight. It's not, but you'll be in a little bit more aggressive position. You're loaded and this thing starts to corner. This thing has a bunch of low end power, especially if you gear it a little bit better. Just be in the proper gear and roll this thing on. There's two schools of riding that you could do if you're an old two-stroke rider or if you're a four-stroke rider. There's roll on and using torque, or there is kind of the wheel spin method. I tend to ride a little bit more on the wheel spin method because I did it for so long, I use both methods kind of depending on what bike I'm on. That's a whole nother hour-long video. On the 690 for General Joe, I'm going to tell you to just roll this thing on as you're going through the corner and just let that torque. If you start banging the clutch on this thing and the wheel starts spinning a lot, you're more susceptible to slide, and you're more susceptible to the heavy weight of the bike kicking out. So it's a little bit more advanced technique. You have to have the fundamentals down before you can get kind of excited about doing that. So that's that, and I'll further explain a couple of these concepts real quick here. In general, you want a pretty straight back, high elbows, bending at the hip. You don't have to be totally fused. You can be Gumby. There's different types of riders. Ones that are a little bit more calculated looking, more robotic looking, and that would be, say, the Lawrence brothers, Hunter and Jet. So Hunter and Jet are always just in the same exact spot. Maybe a Chase Sexton. And then you have other riders that are just as effective, like, say, Justin Barcia. That I ride more like Barcia. On the gas, real spastic, the bike's all over the place, but very, very effective. There's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever gets you to win the race. I don't really lean with the 690 as much as I do, say, a motocross bike. The 690 is big and heavy, and when it breaks loose, it's hard to control. If you watch road racers, they'll come off the seat and they'll get down, and they're in that knee drag position when they're going around the corners, and you see them shifting the weight off the bike on each side, right? And you'll see that in every corner. Watch some of those rear view cameras. They are like this in every corner. If you notice the hips and the angle of the hips when they're doing that, you see that they're shifting that weight with that, and it controls them so they don't high side. On the 690, when I lean the 690, I have everything into the forefoot. The knee is into the side of the bike, holding it. It's driving pressure, and I will put my butt crack on the edge of this seat going around the corner. It's a couple things this does. Number one, the bike leans under you and it keeps your elbows in this attack position. If you lean over with the bike, you'll tend to drop that inside elbow. When you lean the bike under you like this, your elbow will stay up. It tends to hold traction a lot better on this motorcycle too if you lean it over. And as you're leaning it over, if it's trying to pop out the rut, you can just lean it over more underneath you. You can control the bike completely with your legs on where it turns. So as I put pressure on the inside peg here, you see the suspension dips this way, and if I let off, it goes the other way. You can control the bike with pressure. If, say, you go coast down a downhill, and you can just take your hands off the handlebars and you can steer the bike down a hill with just your legs. You need to understand that you can steer with your legs, and especially on a 690 where there's so much mass, so much engine gyro, the bike will move where you go. Same thing on the electric bike. There's a lot of mass up top. We need to control mass. You got to move it around, right? So you can control the bike with your legs. And as we're going through a corner and it's going to pop out of the corner, we can just lean it over a little bit more so that it doesn't jump those ruts. So just lean it over underneath your body a little bit more. Your butt's all the way over here on the seat. It's kind of hard to do when I don't have a videographer in a bike stand, but I can get this thing over on the seat, and the bike is underneath me like this, and then you can roll it on. Another cool benefit of this is if you do slide and drop the bike in the corner, your leg in general isn't pinned underneath it, because it can fall over and you can essentially be standing over top of it and it'll go boom right on the ground. You'll probably fall too, but I prefer to do a side saddle corner on the 690 where my butt will be on the crack, my leg is out like this, and the bike is laid sideways underneath me like that. And if it drops, it just hits the ground. I'm not pinned underneath of it. You get pinned underneath of one of these things, it's hard as hell to get out from underneath of it. I have videos where the thing drops on me and my boot is stuck like somewhere underneath the gas tank. And because it weighs so much, it's hard to get out from underneath of it. You actually have to pry yourself off with your other foot. You have to push the bike off with your foot, because there's no way you're gonna lift it with small amount of leverage while you're laying on the ground. Corner on the side of the seat, the bike's sideways under your body, elbows up, make sure the elbows stay up through the corner, roll the gas on, and the weight is driving into your leg. You can do pistol squats, driving into your foot right now. I can compress the suspension with just the weight of my foot. Drives that into the wheel. That is riding a 690 101. You can apply this to the Freeride. The Freeride and the 690, because of the heavy weight, and the Freeride itself is not super heavy, but the mass is a little bit high. The concepts are a little bit more similar than, say, they would be a lighter motocross bike. All these concepts you can apply to a motocross bike as well, especially the hips, the balls of foot, and the traction driving. In summary, we want to control us independently from the bike so that the bike and us can move differently. That way, the momentum of our body or the momentum of the bike does not control the other. So in this first clip here, I'm really far on the outside of the seat, and I'm also weighting heavily on the foot peg with the ball of my foot. See the hips go really independent right here, so I can soak up those big bumps coming out of the corner. This is a ginormous bumps for the 690. Here, standing late into the corner, all my pressure is on that outside peg, and I'm sitting on the outside of the seat. And then right in here, I'll actually hit a bump, and it picks my butt off the seat, and I resituate onto the weighting the outside peg. Here, this is demonstrating the balls of the feet. You can see he's hitting these big, huge bumps on the 690, and that's allowing my ankles to drop, giving me a couple of extra inches of suspension travel. And if the back end kicks on these things, you can see the hips cross side to side just a little bit as I'm hitting these big bumps. And the grab handles will hit you in the butt there. A little bit closer, better sideways view here. Balls of my feet. You can see a little bit of ankle flexion there. You can see massive movement in my knees and hips. Same thing here. This one, we're going to see the bike get a little crossed up. You can see body's absorbing just, a foot of travel there. Balls of the feet, ankles are locked right kind of down at the frame. 690 doesn't have a frame, but it's got those little guards there. You can see the hips and stuff really flowing with the back end of the bike as it skips around. Heavily weighted outside peg here with the toe. You can see the hook of the corner kicked my foot off a little. This is really fast, really weighting the outside peg as hard as I can because that's a hard cinder surface, as is this surface here. And here you can see heavy weighting and butts on the side of the seat. My knees really loaded up there. Coming in, hit the hook of the corner. The hook of the corner actually throws my foot off the bike. I get back on there, and immediately you can see me taking those next big bumps right here again, and soaking those up with my knees and letting the bike rock back and forth underneath of me. This is the same corner again. Watch the hook, heavy weighted outside peg. Boom, hook throws that leg off. That's a huge bump right there that you don't really get to see very well. The nasty rut in it. And you can see I got a nice line to the next corner. Here, standing late into the corner. Sit right when the pressure starts to get a lot. You can see me heavily weighted on the outside peg with my butt sideways on the seat. Kind of balancing the bike underneath of me, not really leaning with it as much. And then here, body's a little bit straighter again. You can see the outside of the seat and the outside peg heavily weighted, holding that upside rut there. And I used the bump to lift me off the seat. There's a big gap between my butt and the seat, and these are just big holes. This one, you're really going to see the bike move underneath the body, soaking a lot in through my ankles right there. You want to, when you're going this fast, it's about 45 miles an hour through these big whoop holes here, you want all that suspension travel in your ankles and hips as much as you can, especially on the 690 where the grab handles will just come up and hit you in the tailbone and stuff as hard as you can. See, this is an off-camber uphill, very heavy weighted in the foot peg, and it still slid out because I'm using street bike tires on here. And you can see it never even skipped a beat. And I use it to pick my butt up. You can see my hips and knees and everything are going with the angles of the bike as it's getting bucked. Here, same thing, heavy the outside foot. Boom, big old kick. Nothing even moves in my body. My body stays in the same spot as the bike's getting bucked. I don't even know that's happening. Here, this is on my 250F. There's a really steep off-camber, slick, hard ground. You can see how far I'm sitting off the side of the bike, standing on that outer foot peg as hard as I can to put traction to the tires. Here's the 690 getting squirrely in the gravel. You can see my hips really unlocking from the rear of the machine, which is full of fuel. Right here, sitting on the outside of the seat there a little bit, kind of dragging the foot dirt track style. Probably looking for the drone in the camera. But right here, you'll see the butt of the 690 start kicking out, and you'll see my hips get really, really independent from the bike as it's sliding around. You can see I got a kind of a cant to my butt hanging off the side of the seat. High speed, flat corner, really slick. Hit a rain washout. Backside of the bike gets really sideways at, I don't know, we're doing right about 40 miles an hour probably here. And you can see I never skipped a beat. This one is the Freeride. You can see my foot come off the brake, go immediately to the ball of my foot. I've got heavy, heavy weight in that outside peg. This is a flat corner with no rut and a lot of bumps in it. You can see I'm holding the pressure to keep the traction to the ground. Got my foot towards the peg, get a big buck, actually throws my foot off the peg again, but my butt lifts off the seat. So once again, flat corner, same corner, heavy, heavy outside weight, and get my foot back on the peg as soon as I can. Landing from jump here really crooked on the Freeride. Never even skipped a beat. You can see I'm standing up. Hips are independent from the seat and the rear end of the bike, wide open on the gas. Here's my 250F, foot really on the ball, on the foot peg. You can see how far I'm leaning off the side of the bike, shoving all my body weight into that outside peg, trying to gain some traction. This is on my 200SX two-stroke in the snow, and a lot of people comment on how well I can keep traction in the snow. If you really watch me here, you'll see the hips. They hang off of each side of the bike, just trying to drive the bike as it's getting kicked in and out of these really, really deep, snowy, sandy ruts. And wheels spinning at a high speed, really, really on the gas, and you can just see the hips manipulating back and forth, up and down, holding traction as the bike is just absolutely wide open through here. See how much body manipulation is there on the balls of the feet. Yes, if I want to hit the shifter or the brake, I have to move my foot off and forward. It's not a big deal. You can see right here, I'm wading into the seat, but I'm also got so much weight into the peg that when it hits the bump, it picks my butt up for that big, huge roller that's right out of the corner. These whoops are fourth gear wide open. Rear wheel is spinning all over the ice and stuff. You can see the hips doing lots and lots of motion there. The bike is kicking sideways, partially because of the traction, partly because the rebound is too slow and it's not responding fast enough. But you can just see soaking that up. Got a real aggressive head over the front of the bar, so as the bike's getting kicked, it's not throwing me all over the place. That's it, you guys. If you work on this stuff, you will be able to ride your 690 a hell of a lot faster. And someday I hope to get a cameraman and stuff, and so I can show you guys what I can actually do on this machine that probably shouldn't be done on this machine. Well, thanks for watching. If you aren't subscribed, please consider doing so. I do little breakdowns like this every once in a while. Maybe now you guys can look in my riding footage and notice some of these concepts. Just know that I don't get to ride very often. If I could practice, if I didn't have to go to work every single damn day and I could actually ever get to ride and had somewhere good to ride, I would be a much better rider than I am. Just is what it is. I used to be pretty good back in the day. I was a really good sand rider. Really, really good sand rider. I hope you enjoy my 690 videos and my Freeride videos. Thanks, Mitchell, for the jersey. This thing's bad to the bone. Should be in many videos in the future. Appreciate you guys watching. Take care.